Hi, I'm Kent, and I am struggling with what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing in the aftermath of the assassination of Charlie Kirk and in the political milieu in general is an indication to me of a pretty significant confusion, or maybe worse, a sort of invasion of falsehood in at least the portion of Christianity to which I am connected, and it is disconcerting. I am a pastor and a member of a theologically conservative church body, and I have lots of relatives and friends in that vein of Christianity who, as they have responded to this tragic assassination, are saying some specific things that just are not biblically supported. And the confidence with which they are said implies to me that the folks saying them believe that they are rooted in biblical Christianity, when they're not. Let me give you a few examples. You may be familiar with them. For one, I have seen language coming from Christians about getting back at people or shutting people down or even finding vengeance on people. The thinking seems to be that this attack was an attack on Christianity, and there's a whole big group of people complicit in this attack because they disagreed with things that Charlie Kirk said. And while all the details of the motivations of the killer are still being discovered and discussed, it's still the case that if a Christian person were to believe that Charlie Kirk was killed because he is a Christian, and I would expect to see language about turning the other cheek when someone strikes you. I would also expect language about justice, sure, but not about wanting vengeance, because that certainly isn't the way of Jesus, who looked at the people who were crucifying him and said, "Father, forgive them." And look, anger is a part of grieving, and that's not bad, but when the anger starts to organize, or when the anger starts to supersede love, well, then it doesn't sound at all like Jesus. I have also seen some attempts to draw a positive comparison between the death of Charlie Kirk and the death of Jesus Christ, and these things are not the same. Jesus was not politically assassinated because Jesus wasn't trying to accomplish political goals. And while the people involved in crucifying Jesus were using him to serve political ends in some instances, his death was certainly not an unforeseen reactionary tragedy. His death was the culmination of an intentional, predetermined plan to show the world the greatest display of the heart and ethos of God that has ever been shown. In our kind of wild, angry, fear-driven, inwardly focused political climate, where nobody seems to be able to calm things down, the radical love of Jesus, shown in his death, cuts through the chaos by being, quite frankly, the opposite of it. He lays himself down for his enemies, for those who disagree with him, for those who thought that he was the bad guy. It is an outpouring of love that leads us to love our neighbor as we have been loved, which means saying, "I love you more, and I think you're wrong a little less." But we are stuck in the opposite, and that leads me to the last example of dysfunction or falsehood that I've been seeing. I've been seeing a message that comes across as, "It's time to fight." And I think it comes from a sort of misidentification of what the fight, if there even has to be one, really is. The suggestion is that the battle that matters is one between right and wrong, and that can look like a battle between morality and immorality, or rightness or wrongness, or truth and lies. But the next step that is taken by the people who are saying now is the time to fight is to say that a very significant manifestation of that battle is the fight between right-wing and left-wing voices, opinions, and policies. First of all, that fight, the political one, isn't a very good manifestation of those other battles. But secondly, and in a bigger way, the right and wrong battle isn't the big battle, not for Christianity. If we are going to speak of a big and existential struggle that's happening, and that Christians are called to be engaged with, it is not one that's found in political side-taking. The Bible tells us about this in Ephesians chapter 6, where it says, "For we," that's Christians, "we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but we wrestle against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." So if there's a fight to be had, it's certainly not over the policies held by donkeys or elephants or porcupines, nor is it against people who think differently from you. If there's a fight, that fight is against power. I want you to hear me. It's against the idea that power is in any way the solution to what is going on. We wrestle against the idea or the temptation to believe that power, be it political, financial, emotional, social, whatever, that power can be used to win and make things better, because power can't do that. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. You cannot use power to win and make things better, because that's not what it's for. To the extent that power is even useful at all, it's only useful when those who have been given power use it to curb the worst things that can happen. It is permissible for the government to make sure there is justice when people have been treated unjustly, if they need to. If someone is murdered, like Charlie Kirk was, it is permissible for there to be a pursuit of justice. But all that power can do is curb the badness. It cannot, and it is not meant to, create goodness. If you want the world to get better, if you want there to be hope and peace and unity, and if you want people to be able to live in a way that is secure and happy and achieves belonging for them, then you don't want power. You want love. Peace and unity are fruits of love, not of power. And I see so very many people who claim to exist and live according to the love of God, love that they believe is unconditional and boundless and good and ever present. But they behave as if the solution is found in power. And this is a disorienting contradiction. It's a contradiction that makes me wonder, where did it come from? Why are these misconceptions being so dearly held by people who want to be faithful? Why are we at this point? Not just politically, not just culturally in America, but in the church right now, where I'm a professional leader. How did we get here? And look, there are a lot of good, important reasons for where we are today. And we can get great analyses and answers from experts in economy and anthropology and psychology and history and political science all over the place. I am not an expert in those areas. I am a pastor. And so I work in ministry and theology. And from my perspective, there is a certain constant. It is that love, by which I mean like God's overall model of love, is always being undermined. Now, I don't expect that to ever end, but I do think it's good that it's okay for us to identify when and where it's happening. And so I'd like Christianity to be taking a critical inward look, acknowledging what is off track, and then adjusting accordingly. I've been working on what I think are some answers that come from my own experience, and they're not comprehensive, but I do think that they can create some ways for people who feel disconcerted by what they see in Christianity around them to acknowledge that something feels off, to find their footing again, and to engage in fair and faithful conversations. And I would like to share what I'm trying and thinking about with you as responsibly as I can. As I mentioned, I'm a Christian pastor. I started a church in Seattle. It's called Illum a few years ago. And Illum is, in some ways, a response to some issues. And I'd like to acknowledge that. Illum is unusual compared to most churches. And that is in part because the way we do things at Illum is a reaction. It's a reaction to multiple things. For example, I am reacting to the kind of big church culture that I grew up with when I grew up in the Midwest. I am also reacting to the very overlapped, intermixed church is, state is, culture thing that I dealt with when I started my first church in the Bible Belt. I am reacting to the compromising, lesser of two evils thinking, sort of bet with the devil version of things that I've seen while pastoring over the course of the last 3 presidential elections in America. I am reacting to a sort of victim mentality, a scarcity fear mentality that I've seen in churches while I've worked to start one here in Seattle. And all of these experiences and things have led me to think that we're in a place where we need to ask some serious questions about Christianity's current mechanics. We're in a place where what Christianity is doing, how Christianity is functioning, the way that Christianity is engaging people in the regular practice of their faith, and I'm speaking in broad strokes here, isn't working. And it is being manipulated. It is not yielding what it could or should in the lives of individuals or in the fabric of society, and we should react to that. What the church is asking of people, and then what we get when people do what we've asked of them, are very much connected. Like, that's cause and effect stuff. So when we ask people to come sit and listen to somebody on a stage say stuff about what they've studied and thought about, and then to submit to what that person has said, that has certain fruits. We make it so that the practice of sitting and listening to this person on stage, even if and when the person on the stage is wonderful and faithful and loving and humble, we make it so that listening to them say the stuff is central to the experience of the faith. It even gets equated often with like Sabbath, even though that isn't what Sabbath is. And what we're ending up with is sort of, church people who go and sit and listen, but aren't always discerning and don't know how to address or investigate things independently, or don't feel like they have the right to, and are therefore ripe for being misled. Because unfortunately, these folks who want to be faithful become quite practiced at giving a lot of credence to the loudest, most interesting person on a stage. And to the extent that that is what is being put out, I would argue that it does not align with what the output of Jesus's church ought to be. Christianity is meant to yield vulnerable and safe, loving and discerning community, a version of belonging that's based on forgiveness and unconditional love, where people engage with and learn to offer that kind of belonging to each other, where people want to give themselves for one another as God has given Jesus for them. What I'm seeing, what we're getting instead, are sort of coalitions that hang together because they think they are the most right, or maybe more accurately, they hang together because they think the people on their stage are the most right. Coalitions who glorify those they agree with to the point of almost idolatrous reverence, who mock and detest and incriminate those they disagree with, and who are a lot more comfortable yelling from an anonymous distance at those they don't understand than drawing near and sacrificially serving those people, seeking to understand different experiences and find commonality and put the needs of others on at least equal footing with their own. In that, where we are now, it feels very broken. And I am not saying that I or we can make it perfect. But I am saying that it breaks my heart. And I think we should want it to be better. I have ideas about this. These ideas aren't about changing the truth. They aren't about making a new message of Jesus. They aren't about solving our current political mess either, or our future ones. They are about redirecting us into intimate personal relationships with one another. They are about finding ways to be responsible together, to have things be as good for the group as they are for the individual. They are about letting love be the perceived overflow and the real overflow of the abundance that God gives to his people. I have tangible ideas, ones that I'm trying out right now in the gathering of Christians of which I'm a part. They're practical ideas that have been developed as I've led Christians through harsh and dispassionate times. And I think they are healing ideas too that can carry you forward when you feel disheartened by what's going on around you. And I do need help. I need help with testing them, with learning about them, with thinking them through. You see, what we're doing at Illume, from my perspective, while certainly a reaction to the problems I have identified, at least is an attempt to ask questions. Questions like, what if we left what isn't working behind? What if we put relationships at the center, treating connection as the source and goal? What if ministering to one another is more about living as one with each other than about policing each other? What if studying the Bible led to knowing the people you study with better? What if existing and engaging with people who think differently from you is a feature, not a flaw, of a church? What if we, the professional ministers, focused our time on supporting people as they figure things out together instead of trying to solve things for them in 30-minute messages or the like? What if serving the least of these is essential to being a disciple, not an add-on, but essential? And what if we had a version of Christianity, a practice of Christianity, that empowers and encourages people to try together, to engage in those difficult conversations that are so valuable, without being worried about always getting it right, because instead you're focused on forging community? If you find these questions compelling, I would love to talk to you about it. If you find these questions uncomfortable, I would like to understand why. And if you're just excited and you have ideas about ways you'd like to be part of this and contribute to it, I do need help. Let's talk. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter what your church background is. If you think this is interesting, if you think it has potential, let's chat. I want to try this stuff with you. I want to do this experiment with you because we've got to try something. So look, I'm almost done. Thanks for sticking with me this far. If you are feeling like what we're generally doing in Christianity isn't yielding the fruit that it could, the fruit that God dreams of as he dreams for us, let's connect. Because it surely isn't God's fault. It's ours. We are in the way. We are obstructing his good love. We disfigure it and make it very unappealing to a lot of people. And so we ought, empowered by the grace of that forgiving God, with the humility and eagerness of those who have come before us, and with sincere hope for those whose lives we might touch, we ought to seek to do better. If this is compelling to you and you want to join me in it, please reach out. And I promise, I don't know how to fix everything, but I am not going to ask you to keep doing what is so clearly broken.